Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're ready for a long one because we are doing a painting of these little froggies here on a branch with some supposed flowers. But this is a line art, and here is my ghostly first color base, if you will, because that's what it looks like on black canvas, which is interesting, but cool at the same time. So this is me painting the cattails. To be honest, I don't 100% know exactly like how to paint still. Like I've never been a true painter. So you'll have to bear with me, like the blending techniques, because my idea was to start up from the bottom and kind of feather off like towards the top to kind of get a bit of a blending effect. There are times throughout that I actually do kind of achieve that, which without like trying that much, which I'm like, yes. I think it has to do partly with like the colors I chose. Because of the lot of the colors I have really cheap paints. Like this is one of them that you see here, which I got from like a color by number kit. And I get stuff like really cheap ones. I like Craft Smart from Michaels and Apple Barrel from Walmart. Because I'm not an avid painter, it's like I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of money trying to grab everything. This is me just trying to like figure out how I'm going to be painting things. Because, you know, sometimes I talk to myself. I'm sure we all do it. So I'll kind of like in my head point at things and just think about how I'm going to do certain things. So some of these paints are a little bit better than others. And depending on the color I chose, they obviously blend a little bit more. But yeah, we're still working it out. So whenever I do these base colors, I actually kind of go based off of how it looks of where I'm putting my lights and my darks. Which I'm like is kind of helpful because it's almost like, it's not intentional, but I think it's like a good guideline of where I want to put my stuff at. But that's just me. So obviously with the cattails, it kind of for me makes sense for it to be top down lighting because they're round, and it just makes a little more sense because the water is not glowing or anything. Like it's just kind of regular old water is what this was, so it's not anything super special. And I did have to use a dark blue because the other brown I had, like I had one other dark brown. I think it was so similar to like the last dark brown I used that I was like, there's not much point in me doing that. So I just did not. So I just went with this dark blue. And I just went back in and started to work on the ground part. I guess the little baby cliff. I don't know what that's called. I don't know the proper term. The dirt. I don't know. I just used the same colors I did for the cattail because it kind of just made sense since it was brown as well to just keep using that. It was a little tricky trying to get around on cattails and the stalks, but I managed. It's just when stuff like that happens to me, it makes it a lot harder for me to color it properly. I don't know. It's just because it's like I tend to kind of color around the edges of whatever is blocking it, which I know is really bad because it kind of gives it like a halo effect. So I was trying to fix that before it got like really, really bad. It kind of helps a little later on whenever I do get to actually like coloring the stalks. It kind of works. So this is, I know it's a really, really light green, but this is me starting to put down the shadows now. And like I said, I'm kind of going based off of the way I did the base color. But grass is very difficult for me, so I'm trying to like clump it together and just do like that kind of shading to kind of give the effect of grass, but I don't know. When I actually did these greens right here, they actually kind of blended really nicely for me, and I was like, oh, this actually looks really good. Even in the pond, or like, I guess the water, the pond, whatever, I was actually trying to put down like little moss parts or something. Kind of have like some things floating in there. But I don't know, it's just a grass did blend, but all three of these paints I think came from like the same painting kit. So I think it just helped. But I didn't have to do a whole lot of work to get them blended, and I love it. I'm like, it just turned out so good. But this is me still trying to like figure out the grass situation and just trying to do clumps of it to give the effect. Because if you look at grass itself, to me, it looks like there are like clumps of like light and dark. And obviously just trying to go through and add in like little blades of grass to kind of give it a grassy effect. I don't know. So with the water here, again, because of the way the base was, where it's like on the right side, it was a lot lighter, and towards the frog, it was a lot darker. I did want to use that effect I already had and just use it as my base. So again, with the water too, I was like, this actually kind of turned out really cool. So I know with water, it's important for it to not like completely blend or it won't look like water. Because, you know, water's got like a bunch of different you know, shades of blue and everything in it. So that's what I was trying to go for. These lotus flowers, yeah. I think it would have helped me more if I had 2 more different reds, but the 2 reds I have right here were so similar in color that it didn't really help, I think is my problem. Because, I mean, they blended, but it still didn't work out right. And so what I'm painting right now were originally flowers. That was my idea. I guess like cherry blossoms or something, I don't know. But the more I did them, I'm like, these don't look like flowers. So I was like, you know what? It's gonna be mushrooms. So they're now mushrooms. Which I guess it kind of also works like being in like a pond, you know, wet area. Mushrooms kind of grow there. So that's what I kind of figured. I was like, I'm just gonna roll with it. Because it does look like it's clumped up mushrooms. I don't know what the proper mushroom term would be. But it looks like mushroom clumps kind of thing. So I was like, honestly, that actually looks still kind of good with the way I was doing it, because I was trying to get it to where it was like different form, the different parts of the mushrooms were in shadow and some were lighter and everything, and they had more highlights on them. So that's what I was attempting to do. And actually the wood actually turned out kind of nice because it kind of blended the way it should have. Wood is a little bit of a difficult challenge for me because of the way it's, you know, it's depending on if you go bumpy, smooth, you know, raised or flat or whatever, you get all these like different line textures. So that's what I was attempting to do while still kind of keeping in mind where the shadows were. But again, overall, the wood and the water I think are probably 2 of my favorite parts throughout this whole thing. So I think they both turned out really, really well. Especially later on when I show like a better version of it. It does look a lot better with the way it looks overall, especially with like certain parts of the bark being highlighted and everything, like where the light would be touching it and stuff. So I'm like, overall, it actually turned out really, really nice compared to everything else. This little froggy, he actually turned out okay. I was trying to think like if they're wet, they're gonna be a little bit slick, which I guess in a way I kind of managed to do. I didn't completely blend them out, but I feel like certain areas I probably did it okay enough that I can kind of pass for them being wet. You know, little wet, little slimy, I suppose. I've never really held a frog, but to me, I feel like they'd probably be a little slimy if they're in the pond water and whatnot. So that's what I was trying to do here, but also because of his back, I was trying to make it look like he was a little bit rounder. So that way towards the top, he was brighter than the sides. He was a little bit darker to kind of give that, I guess, bowled over appearance with his back and stuff. And then I was trying to do, I guess, more top-down lighting as well. So again, I'm just trying to put the shadows where I think they would go to kind of help. So it kind of worked. But later on, I do a little bit better with blending it out a tiny bit. But we'll have to wait until I get to gouache, because I do put gouache on this for a reason, which I think it kind of helped with the gouache. Because again, these are kind of darker paints, so the gouache kind of just like brightens it up a lot, which you'll see, which I actually think is kind of a cool effect. And this is canvas, it's not watercolor paper or anything, but I still think it worked. And I'm not 100% with gouache either. I'm still trying to learn gouache, but for what I need it for, I'm like, I think it works. So now with the purple and the blue, I'm trying to go a little bit darker in these areas because again, he's hunched over. So for me, some parts might be a little bit brighter because of like where, I guess like for me, where the muscle structure would be with how I like to do it. Even though he's in shadow, I feel like certain parts, especially like the leg muscles, again, will have more highlights to kind of amplify those. That's just me. And his feet, I didn't put too much highlights on them because again, most of it actually is in shadow because he's hunched over. He is covering most of it. So it makes sense for most of it to be a little bit darker. Some of it would probably have a little bit of highlight depending on where, like, I guess the knuckles, I'm gonna call them knuckles, where they would be kind of raised on the feet and stuff. That's what I was trying to go for. And like this foot that's on the right, I guess his left foot, it would be kind of pointed out a tiny bit. So I'm like, there would be a little bit of a highlight on it because it wouldn't be completely covered to me anyway. I don't know. Now his 2 front feet, yeah, they're gonna be a little bit darker. But here's the overall look so far. This is just the acrylic. So as you can see, I've already started adding gouache. It looks so much better. Again, I love the water. Which you'll see me mess with it with the gouache, and I'm like, it looks so cool. I'm like, I actually really like it. And with this, I was trying to put in like the light green and pink highlights to kind of reflect off the water. Even though underneath the lily pads and stuff, it's a little bit darker, obviously, because it's like shadow. But I do add the green in there, and I'm like, I think it looks so good. Like that little circle is probably definitely my favorite little circle of the three. The top one, I don't even know. It ran away from me. It's whatever now. But just this part, just adding that gouache on, I think it just did so much like good because it just helped. Because it added in a brightness, I could blend it a little bit. Like it just kind of gave another layer to the paint. I could kind of cover up some mistakes and just kind of add in some new lines and like a little more depth. So I was like, I do like adding the gouache on here. It acts like acrylic to me, but I feel like that's good because it's like more opaque acrylic. Because again, the paints that the actual acrylic I have is very cheap. Like it still works for my purpose, as you can see, because again, I'm not like a professional painter. So I'm like, for right now, for what I do, I'm like, it's kind of perfect for me. And that's why I like the gouache. I'm like, because I can just add in some extra colors I don't have before, and it actually makes it a lot better looking. It adds in a little bit of vibrancy and all this stuff without me really trying, and it kind of does blend a little bit more. Because I'm not saying I completely waited for this to dry before I kept going with it. Because I knew if I had it a little bit wet still, it would still blend a little bit more. So that's why I kept doing it. So again, with the water, when I originally put down the base, it looked really cool with the way I actually had it unintentionally, like in the light and the dark areas. So again, that's what I was kind of going based off of. But I was trying to think, I'm like, where do I want the highlights still? Because obviously I don't want to cover up everything and make it like super dark. But I was like, if it turns out darker than normal, then maybe those areas could be a lot more shaded than the other circle at the bottom. That was kind of the idea. But again, I think overall it still turned out really nicely. I think with this blue right here, I had a little bit too much water on it. Because the way I do gouache is I will dip my paintbrush in the water. I'll let some droplets drip on the paint, and then I use that. I'll give it a second to kind of soak in, and then I'll use it so it acts more opaque, like more like acrylic than actual like watercolor. So sometimes I still don't get it completely right, but that's just kind of the way like I've learned how to do it, because it does dry so fast. So just by letting a little bit of droplet water on there, to me it helps. I don't know. But here I did go back in with like a base color to add in the highlights again and just a tiny bit more. I feel like it helps and it doesn't at the same time. I don't know. I was again just kind of testing it out. Like you can see on the frog there, I was adding in like dots to kind of like add a little bit of texture to the skin. So I feel like there's like little hexagonal patterns on frog skin. So that's kind of what the intention was. So I went back in with the paints and did like kind of brought out the highlights a little bit more, especially if they got lost, just to kind of add a little bit of something. But I'm not entirely sure if that kind of gave me the overall effect I was really wanting. But I was also just trying something new. So it's, you know, I'm just trying something. I'm experimenting and trying to see where I can go with this. So that's just the way it worked. Now back up here to the mushrooms. Again, in certain areas, I was trying to think about where the light would be hitting it. Where is it going to be kind of dark at? So I was trying to go off of that. I feel like most of it is kind of like poking out and poking up and not really covered. So most of it would have some type of highlight on it. These bottom ones, I was trying to like give that more an effect. Like I feel like some of them would be poking out enough from the bark that some sun and like some light would be hitting them. But then like underneath it, not so much. So like under the frog, I probably should have not done any highlights at all. And I should have just left it like dark is what I should have done, but I did not. So that is me. But in a way I still, yeah, that was probably wrong. Not probably, it was wrong, but it is what it is. That's what I did. But I'm also like, well, maybe they're not directly under the frog. Like they could be kind of sticking off to the side, like enough that light is still hitting it. but I don't really know if that would pass. But that's just me. So that's kind of just what I came up with. That's my excuse for the way they look. But even with these reds, because with the gouache, I still was going with darker colors, but again, they didn't really turn out the way I wanted. So that's just the way it is. Again, with the bark, whenever I do browns for the highlight, I tend to go with a yellow color or like an orangey yellow color or something. I feel like it kind of works with the brown just to kind of give it a little bit of brightness. That's just me. And then I use a kind of, was it like an umber or something? Not an umber, like an ochre, maybe like a lighter brown. To start off with like an actual like base color instead of like just a highlight. And then with a dark brown and a dark blue. So I think the dark blue does kind of work. It just kind of adds a nice shading. So that way it's a little bit different than like the generic color, but I still feel like it kind of blends in enough that it's not like too outstanding. I just feel like it kind of helps with giving the shadows a little bit, because I do like my shadows to be there. I'm not someone who does, you know, like light shadows. Like I like for them to kind of stand out and be there. That is just me. Going back in with the paints just to add in a little bit of extra light. Again, to kind of bring out the highlights a tiny bit. Even on the other side, those darker ones I did, like the bottom ones, just to have a little bit of like reflection on it. Not too much, but a little bit. Same thing with this yellow here. Just going back in just to add in a little bit of highlight to kind of bring it back out some. Also, I guess to help make it a tiny bit brighter, I suppose. So now with the blue and going back in with the gouache, I was trying to add like over top the acrylic. Not so much, but enough that I could kind of blend it out. So this like indigo acrylic I have doesn't stand out too much. It kind of works, but doesn't. But I'm like, it's also okay because again, I don't mind the shadows. I was just trying to make it look a little bit better, if you will, because some of these little cups I have of the acrylic are kind of a little bit dried out. They still work, but they're not like the best. So that's why it looks a little splotchy sometimes, and it just didn't turn out really well. But I kind of like having dark colors available to use because of the shadows. With his inside leg here, most of it I kind of kept in shadow because I figured it would be since it was in the inside and I have that front leg kind of coming over it. I left a little bit of highlight there just to kind of differentiate from the belly a little bit, but also just thinking that maybe there might be some light kind of hitting it a tiny bit. This foot I kept mostly in shadow, not a ton. I feel like some parts might be hit by the light because of the way that the toes are kind of curled up holding the branch, which to me I guess kind of makes sense, but I'm also like that might be like shadow, but I'm like, again, oh well, I did what I did. So going back in with this acrylic, I'm trying to add the little spots back in to kind of give them some texture on there. I don't really have a super tiny brush to do this. I was trying to like pick more of a pointier brush to do it, but I mean it worked and it didn't at the same time. I feel like it does kind of give it a little bit of something, but I don't know. I was trying to like just add in some extra details that I don't normally do, but because it was paint, I figured it was easier to do that. Just to kind of show that stuff, and with the sun hitting it, I'm like, it does make sense to have some type of texture on there. So, again, this is me just trying to learn and just experimenting and just doing something a little bit different. So I'm sure over time, the more I do this, the better I'll get. But right now, we're a little questionable here. But that's okay. So, I think I'm trying to find the paints. I also was watching TV while I was painting this, so I got distracted. You know how it is. But with his arm and whatnot, I figured the green part would mostly be in shadow for the most part. Because if it's bending upward, I feel like more of the blue part would have more highlight. But because, again, I do add in like a bit of a muscular structure in there, to me, it would still hit. Because if you think about it, like the shoulder and the actual arm, I guess the bicep, I don't know if I don't know if the frog terms are still correct. I'm just trying to think here. But I feel like it would still be, because it is curved and it's kind of poked out, it would still make sense for it to be in some type of lighting still, like it is being touched. Because again, it's not flat, it's curved, it's poking out. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, like with the feet here again. Even though his legs kind of curled over his feet, I still feel like the leg might be back just enough that the curved part of the toes would still get some kind of sunlight on them. I don't want to say sunlight, I'm not saying some kind of light, we'll keep with light. Some kind of light on them, because it's still like hitting it. I feel like for the underside of the jaw and the part, like the top part of the chest with him looking upwards, it makes sense for it to be lighter. Because I feel like, again, it's curved, it's pointing upwards, it would make sense for it to have some type of light. Because like the way I do it is like the back part of the jaw is down a little bit more. So that's why I was trying to like make it a little bit curved too. Because like with the larger frog I drew, the purple one, the underside of the jaw is curved. So that's why I was like, I was kind of doing it that way. I'm also trying to blend it out, which again, with these green colors I used, actually worked out really well with blending the whole way through. So I was actually really happy with those. That back leg to me was mostly in shadow. I feel like, again, some parts there'd be a tiny bit of light reflection coming off of it. Not a bunch, but just some. I don't normally do that, but again, I was trying to think like if he is wet, it would make sense for that to kind of happen to show he is a little bit wet still. Even though I don't have water dripping off of him, but that's just me. I was trying to think, I'm like, would this make sense? Some of it does, some of it doesn't, but you know. These blues, again, where the light was hitting it, I feel like it kind of makes sense. Because I feel like the way I was doing it here, it kind of looks a little bit wet. Which is good. Because I feel like when something's wet, there's like a whole bunch of like two sides of it, I think to me are almost kind of like they do have highlights on them. And then some parts are darker, like in the middle and on the sides. So that's what I was trying to do here. And like trying to mimic that a little bit. No, I did not look at references. I really don't ever look at references, to be completely honest. That's just not something I've ever really done. If I need to, I will. Like if I've never seen something before, I'm not sure how it looks, I'll look at a reference. But for the most part, I don't. These frogs are no exception. I did not look at reference at all. I just kind of drew them the way I wanted to and just kind of painted them the way I wanted to. So that's why they look like this. But here's what the gouache added, which again, it's looking really good. There's vibrancy, there's texture. So I was like, honestly, I'm not going to complain because they still look really, really good overall. So I'm like, honestly, I'm actually pretty happy with it. I'm like, it's still me. Obviously, there's still a lot I could be working on. But again, I don't paint very often. This is probably the third painting I've done since I've like started this channel. I don't do it very often, but it's like I have so many different painting projects to do that I could do it more. Like I actually have some coming up. I bought some little minifigures. I've never painted minifigures before, but I was like, why not give it a try? I only have acrylic paint, so I'm kind of hoping it doesn't ruin it. I will probably put gesso over it just to kind of help. But those will be for future videos, so stay tuned for those. But here, I love my colored pencils. I love Prismas. I've used Prisma colors forever now. They are my favorite because to me, they just blend. It's because they're waxy, so they blend really well. I feel like they have really good coverage. They just do what I need them to do. Like I have a bunch of other colored pencils, but they're cheap. So I have polychromos. I tried to use them, but they do not work for the purpose that I have. Because to me, Prismas are the best for what I do. So like even on here, they're not like super, super apparent, but I still feel like they kind of give enough that it just adds a little bit more. Especially with the white, obviously. The yellow, I was trying to add a little bit of extra color with the yellow. I don't know what I was doing. I don't know if it works, but I did it. Again, it's not super apparent, but it's still there just to add. It was mostly just to kind of add a little bit of color. A tiny bit of interest, but it was kind of done on the fly. And I only did it on the frogs and the bark, so I don't know. But when I added the pencil on the mushrooms, I feel like it helped out a lot because I had some different colors. And my new thing now is lately I've been adding indigo blue in there for the shadows on everything. I just feel like the indigo just works for shading in general. I don't do it, depending on how dark the color is, depends on how dark I put the indigo on there. But I still do it just, again, as you can see here, to add in that nice little extra shadow, which I do think helped with the mushrooms, just to kind of differentiate them a tiny bit from one another. And it just kind of, and like adding the white too, again, it just kind of adds probably something I was missing to make it look like there's more mushrooms than what there actually were. And it just kind of helps give a little bit of depth to the different parts of the mushroom. Again, adding the yellow in here just to give an extra color. We're still questionable about if it actually worked. So now I'm going back in here with the green as well to do the same thing. So now I'm actually going to clear the whole frog again with pencil. I did this with the other two. Partly why I still use color pencil is because, again, I'm not 100% sure how to use paint exactly. Like, I see some people do really cool stuff. Again, I'm not an avid painter. I feel like, and also I like doing mixed media because a lot of the time I do use markers and pencils. Like, that's just what I use. So that's why I'm like, I enjoy using the pencils with stuff. Because I feel like it helps just add a little bit more depth. Even if it's not super apparent, it's still there. I can kind of help add a little bit extra lines or just differentiate stuff a little bit more. And I can get like darker colors too that I normally wouldn't get. And to me, it just kind of helps, like with the way I personally do things. For me, it just works. Like just adding paint, like you saw before, like it looked okay. But I just feel like adding that pencil in just helps. So maybe over time, if I get more comfortable with just using paints, I might not use pencils anymore. I don't know. But for now, I still don't mind paints. Or using pencils with paints. So then with this, what I started to do was I went back and actually added in the acrylic paint on top of the pencil. I figured let me try it to see if I can add in a little bit more texture. And it actually kind of worked. So the pencil didn't hinder me from using the paints. Like it still, the paints went on okay. So I was like, I didn't have any problems there. Again, I'm just going back in to try and kind of get that little bit of a hexagonal texture of frog skin is what I was doing. The purple, it's not super apparent on the blue. It was done a little bit more because of the color I used for the blue. The purple, I don't have a super light purple to make it work that well. But you can still see I did it with the gray originally. So, but I also kind of like how I did his underbelly and stuff. I feel like, again, it kind of worked with what I was doing. With trying to keep the edges dark and the outside lighter. Because, again, I have him more as a round shape. So, for me, it worked. With the legs and stuff, I feel like his back legs, I feel like they were mostly in shadow with the way I tend to draw the legs and the way where the lighting was. Like, he was mostly like over his back legs, so that's why mostly they're in shadow. Again, I add a tiny bit of white to kind of give a wet appearance, to kind of show it's not like completely flat. Like, there's still something there. So that's why I'm like, it actually, like, it works. Because, again, it just lets me add a little bit more than what I couldn't before. Because, again, I don't really know how. But it's also, like, I don't mind doing it this way. Because, again, mixed media like this is partial to me. Like, I actually like doing it that way. Because I just feel like I can get a little bit more out of it. So that's what I was kind of doing here. So that's why I'm like, I'm not really going to complain. Like, I think it works. So I am actually using gray with purple because I also do this with black as well. Well, no. I use gray with the purple because for me, when it blends out, I feel like the gray and purple work really, really well together. Because I don't really, especially like I use a lilac color for one of my base colors. I feel like having that gray in there, it gives it light enough that it doesn't overpower the lilac. So when I blend them out, they blend very nicely together. So that's why I went in with the gray first on the purple, even though like the green and the blue example, I use a light green and a light blue. Again, to me those work because I have set colors that I use with other colors because to me they just work really nicely. So same thing here with this purple. And yes, I went back in again with the indigo blue just to kind of add in a little bit more. As you can see it here, it actually kind of works. Like I'm able to darken up some areas without it like becoming overpowering, and it blends. Like it does give that little bit of extraness that I need without being like too obvious. So that's why I'm like, I enjoy it. And again, with the white, the white wasn't like super apparent on here because especially with the gray, it's super light. But in the areas I could get it, I kind of did get that wet texture I was going for a tiny bit. I had the yellow on here, not a ton, because I knew it would probably stand out a little bit more in the purple, but it was kind of enough that it gives an extra color of like, I guess, stuff kind of bouncing off the frogs, but it doesn't make it look really bad. Right, I'm just trying to add it in something because I don't do a whole lot of like lighting differences. That's just not something I like doing. It's just not me. But I feel like doing this just adds in a tiny bit more without it being like where I'm not doing anything too crazy. I mess it up, but it's like enough that it looks a little different. Right, like it's not really there, but it's there. It just helps to add a little bit more. So, but here's what the final looks like. I did go back to outline it a little bit. It looks a little cartoony, but I'm like, overall, I'm happy with it. I think my little frogs turned out really cute. And I am making new designs to put up in my store at the end of December. So be ready for those. So this will be available as a print here eventually at the end if you'd like to buy one. But if you guys want to see more from me, I like to do art. So drawing, getting the painting, sculpting, fantasy, comics, dinosaurs, characters. If that interests you, please like, follow, subscribe, and everything, and follow me along this journey. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.